Hello, everyone. We're just coming in now to the LinkedIn Live with Thad Hollis to discuss communication and how it can really work in a person's favor and how it cannot during times of conflict and stress. Just wish you all, everyone watching, a very happy new year, a strong start to 2026. And we're just going to give it a couple of minutes before we actually start the discussion. So, hi, Thad. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Vicky. Yeah, it's been a great one so far.
It has. It's been wonderful. We were very blessed to have some real downtime over the holidays and just really enjoy that peacefulness of doing the things we wanted to do when we wanted to do it.
Absolutely. That was the magic of having this downtime, quiet time, respectful time, rejuvenating, re-energizing, refocusing. That's what
Yeah,
vacations are about. And we
it
had what?
really is.
Many.
We've, it was a mini one, but feel very blessed to have had that opportunity because I know not everybody does. And when we have these things, it's just lovely to recognize it. And for one, I'm very grateful. So today's conversation is a little bit, it could be heavier. It's one of those things that people tend to avoid from time
Mm.
to time. Difficult conversations. I like to call them courageous conversations. We can talk a bit about that too. So, just by way of introduction, and hello, everyone who's joining us live or watching the replay. Please let yourselves be known. We'd love to know that you're here with us on this LinkedIn Live. The purpose of these LinkedIn Lives is really to get more information out to people who need it. And whether that's people who are considering separation or perhaps they're in the middle of a divorce, amicable or otherwise. Perhaps they're picking up the pieces and looking to have a really good, fresh, strong start to 2026, having been separated last year, and there's still perhaps a few loose ends to be tidied up. So these are the kinds of things we talk about in this series. It is a weekly series. Some weeks we are not available, but for the most part, on a Wednesday at 12:30 Brisbane time, we're here for about half an hour to answer questions about conflict coaching, conflict management, divorce coaching, and anything to do really with alternative dispute resolution. Thad is the expert in that area. He has spent over 30 years working internationally in alternative dispute resolution as a mediator and now more recently as a divorce coach and conflict coach. And we're spending this next half hour talking specifically about communication and how it can fall apart when emotions run high and
Hmm.
what can actually be done about it. So, if you're a family lawyer and you're looking for better ways to help your clients navigate conflict, or you're personally dealing with a separation, our goal today is really to give you practical tools that you can use straight away. So, Thad, let's jump right in with my first question. And it's about how conflict escalates so quickly and quite often unexpectedly when we're trying to communicate something that we need or want. So we've seen it happen so many times. Two people will start a conversation trying to sort something out, and just within minutes, it seems like it's completely derailed. So, what actually is happening in those moments when a simple discussion can quickly turn into a fight?
It's the perception that people have that, I need something needs to happen. I feel there's an injustice or there's something I'm not going to get. I'm feeling imbalanced and things escalate. And, we go into that fight, flight, freeze. And, it's that reptilian part of the brain that, sits right back here. This part that sits there and goes, something's going on. And we do the one thing that most of us do as humans is we hold our breath. Oh my God, I'm not getting what I need. Someone's going to be taken away. And it doesn't really matter what it happens in every situation, whether they're talking family or workplace or just a conversation sometimes with a sibling. You talk about sibling rivalries. All this can happen in a split second. And based on past experiences, we start to replay the video in our head. And we have the conversation, things are going on, nanoseconds. And all of a sudden, it's like you're not going to give me what I want. So I'm going to have to defend myself. So I'm going to get aggressive because I've been told that if I get aggressive, I'm going to get what I want. And, aggression leads to aggression. It, the best way to have peace is stop the war. It only takes one, you know, and one initiates, one can respond, the other one can respond. And, the escalation in communication happens when one says one thing, the other starts to, and then this thing starts to, it goes up and up and up until we're at a point where what was the original conversation about? Well, I can't remember now, but you were wrong. And so a lot of the blaming, the I language starts to come in.
Tell me about
And
that.
well,
I language.
the I language. I'm not getting what I want. You haven't given me what I need here. And you can put your own words around that, but it
You
happens.
always do. Boom, boom, boom. There's
Yeah,
generalizations that
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
You always, you never.
yeah. I'm not getting what I need. You're not meeting my needs. I'm not, it's,
Why can't you just?
yeah, no. And it's that blaming and shaming conversation that really has nothing to do with the present moment. It may have been talking about, in a family situation, coordinating a time to drop the kids off to pick them up at Macca's. That's where we're going to be having the drop off point. Or it could be just a regular conversation about what to happen when, we're dropping the kids off over Christmas and what went on. And it starts to escalate. And people are like, well, in my past, I know that you didn't meet my needs, so why would you be meeting them now? Forgetting that we're talking future, not going backwards, and we're talking how are the kids being used here? So there's a lot of questions that happen that can escalate a conversation beyond what the point of the conversation was really about.
Mm. And so what I'm hearing is when we say things that are on our mind, because really that's what we think communication is, sharing our thoughts and what's on our mind. And it's a very real scenario that there could be frustration between parties in the examples you shared. If there is history of expectations not being met or agreements not being met. If
Mm-hmm.
it was agreed scenario A would happen and it didn't, the other party feels let down. This can feel, this is real. This is real life.
Yeah,
So it
this
would
is
be
real life.
normal to say, why can't you just show up on time? Or why can't you just do what you promised?
Yeah.
So I'm curious what other language might be useful in a scenario like that, because a party wants to share their frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, first of all, is it necessary for a party to share their frustration? What is the purpose of sharing frustration in communication, in effective communication?
Well, let's just use an imaginary scenario. It's a parent drop off. They've agreed to a neutral mutual territory, and we'll call it the meeting at the local Macca's, the McDonald's, and in the car park. And they're going to have the kids move from one car to the other and that sort of thing. And we'll say it's a daughter. She's got a ballet class that's going to be, or a swimming lesson. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's an event that's coming up that the drop off's at noon, but the event's going to be at 1. So we've got like 20 minutes to do the exchange, get things there. And the parent that's late is now getting there 20 minutes or a half hour late. The other one's going, you never make time. You're always late. And they start an escalation in front of the kids. What they wanted to say was, I'm really sorry that you had to be late, but our daughter's got to get to her recital. Is there a way that I could have helped out in the beginning to pick her up? Or it's a conversation, and it's like sort of like I love the word pause before I'm going to tell you how frustrated I am because I have fear that she's not going to make her lesson on time. Something's going to be happening. She's going to be disappointed. I'm going to be dealing with the tears. I'm going to be dealing with the frustrations, and I'm gonna, and Oh my God, you've done this to me again. Pause. None of that's happening. None of it's going to happen, but it's based on the past because our kids mirror back what we're doing. So imagine the scenario then where the parent is late turns up and the other parent goes, great, good to see you. Let's get the kids. We're running a little late because we've got a recital at, in half an hour and we've only got 15 minutes to sort of get there on time. I'll text you when other things are going on for the lessons afterwards so we can communicate later. It's avoiding the overshare about all the other things that you're imagining would happen because none of them are happening. And if you don't want the escalation with the kids, simple thing is because the kids will mirror the behavior is don't escalate yourself. Because if you're
Mm,
anxious, kids are going to get anxious and they're going to be like, oh my God, something's wrong. I'm disappointed. And children take on the blame for the parents saying, I made you late, so therefore it's my fault. I'm the one that, and you know, if we don't make drama out of anything, there's not going to be a drama. It's it,
mm.
it's one of
There's
those
some key points
self-fulfilling
there.
statements, you know?
Yeah, it's very much about how do we manage our state in that moment,
Yeah,
and that impacts the state of those around us. So I'm hearing like if we don't want drama, don't do drama, don't be drama, leave the drama out of it. But I mean, this is not a judgment. Drama
no,
sometimes has negative connotations. It's just a real way of being. It's a human nature thing. We're
yeah,
reacting versus responding. So I wonder if you can. There's so much more to be said around that. Maybe
yeah,
we'll pick it up in other conversations. And I wonder if you could share what the difference is really between reacting and responding. I think that example you gave might have
yeah,
been one in that,
yeah.
there's some intention and thought behind it rather than a knee jerk like reaction.
Because in both scenarios, the thought process might be, I'm going to have a meltdown because they're late. I don't know what they're late for, and then a whole bunch of other things are happening, and I've got emotions coming up. Whereas if I pause and we breathe, and we talked about that the last time we were on here, about how important it is to breathe and just take that breath in. It oxygenates the body, it slows down the heart rate. We're no longer going to be in a panic, the fight, flight, freeze mode. And now we can think a little more rationally. And it's like, what do we need here? Is this a necessary conversation? Is this going to advance what needs to happen, which is getting our daughter to her appointment on time? Having the conversation isn't going to change blame, shame, fighting, doesn't change what we're facing right now. But that's rational thought. And it's training the brain to think a little differently. And it's training ourselves to stop I need this because I don't want to face the meltdown. That has that's not going to happen if you don't go into the meltdown yourself. So the easiest thing to do is to pause, breathe, and look at what the reaction will be if you just say, great to see you. We're a little tight on time. I'll text you later.
Mm,
And that says, you know, some information, you're not assigning blame, and your ex-spouse is not going to look at you, your ex-partner is not going to look at you and go, well, hang on, I gotta, it's like they may want to say, you know what, we're late because, and say, that's okay. The
mm.
because isn't going to be as important as we need to get to the appointment. We can text later.
I'm
I'll
hearing
give it.
there's
I'll give it.
some adulting happening here.
It's some adulting. It's There's so many ways of doing that. When working with a client recently, um, he and his ex have not um, had good communication over the last decade. It has been fraught with passive aggressive language. It's been fraught with blaming, shaming, um, comments that come into and so I made some suggestions and said, well, let's not overshare here because you're talking about, well, you make me feel this is happening. They can't do any of those things. What do you want to say? Well, I need her to pick the girls up. Okay, so why don't you just say, I'm a little tight on time this week. Is it okay if you pick the girls up and then I can pick them up from yours at such and such a time? I says, how's that going to work? I said, well, why don't you just ask if you can do that?
Mm.
Rather than giving the explanation of all the other things that are going on and anticipating that she's not going to be able to say yes because she's always been difficult around this. Why don't you just ask? Just there's three things you need to convey those three things, and that's it. He did that, and he came back and he got NP, no problem. Like,
Mm.
he says, well, she didn't go into any explanation. I said, no, but you got the information you needed, which is not a problem. You'll be able to pick the girls up from hers. End of story. And I was like, well, that was easy. And I went, it's not always going to be easy, and don't expect it to be perfect because you're never going to be in 100% calm. But with practice, it gets better.
Yeah, and I'm hearing here that he went into that with different expectations or no expectations
Mm-hmm.
versus in the past pattern there was this expectation that there'd be pushback because that's what history had shown.
Yeah.
But yet if we come at it with a fresh heart, fresh eyes, and a fresh view and say, if I do something different, maybe I'll get a different response. And it sounds like he did something different and it
Got
delivered
a
a
different response.
different outcome.
And the key for that coaching moment was, what do you need to ask? And let's keep it in monosyllables. Let's keep it in really basic, simple language that's easily conveyed. No interpretation happens because the more words and bigger words we use, the more inflection we try to put in. No one's going to hear that because it's in a text. Whereas if you just write in a monosyllable term, basic text, basic information, you know, I'm running late. Can you do this? Is that okay? I can pick them up from yours. Something along those lines. The result is no problem. No debate back and forth. None of this usual accusatory. Well, you're always doing this. Da, da, da. Anyway, I didn't get any of that. Well, because you didn't actually give the rope that was going to tie you to it, right?
This
So,
is the
there it is.
thing. Yes, so the communication we get back is very dependent on what we start with. If we put something on the table, we have to be careful about what we're putting on the table if we want to manage what comes back to us. Is what I'm hearing in
Exactly.
simple
Yeah.
terms. And so having that forethought before the text is sent, before an email is sent, before even a phone call is made, to get clear on what the end result is that you want. Start with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your expression about not oversharing. Oversharing is such an interesting concept because we think the more we share, the more we're communicating. But I'm hearing that there's really not that's not how it works in conflict.
It's not how it works in normal every day. I mean, I look at my life partner and there's some stories I tell her and she looks at me and goes, really? Do I need to know all that? I mean, what is it you're asking? And I'm like, but I want to give you the background because, and
And that's more for you than it is for the other party. I'm getting that now.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
it's
it's
an
like,
expression of self, but
no,
perhaps in conflict situations, there's not a lot of room for expression of self, or really not a lot of purpose for it.
well, particularly when there's a history. So I'll use this, let's bring it in narrow boundaries. We'll call them boundaries. And rather than using this phrase with some of the clients, we're talking about boundaries. It's like, let's just keep the conversation narrow, on point, and on the kids. Because that's where you have mutual. You don't need to talk about any of the other things you're doing on the weekend because they're not interested. It's now you've been separated long enough that how is that now relevant to the conversation, except as it may affect the children? That's the only boundary that you need to keep is how is this affecting the children? Is this going to advance the conversation to get what we need as an outcome? And it's just that focus. I know I'm guilty of telling the story. I'd love to tell the Shaggy Dog story. It's like let's take you all the way to Sydney if we got to get just around the corner to Brisbane. But that's just my style, and I've met a lot of people like that, and I've had to say, well, hang on. There's moments when that's appropriate, but when communicating with your ex or communicating something to do with the parenting, you want to make sure that you're staying within that lane. You keep it clean, you keep it focused, and it's always going to be future focused. It's always going to be non-blaming, non-shaming, and it's about the kids. It's always going to be about the children. It's never going to be about what I need. Never the I, never the you, except to say, can you help me? Is it appropriate if you, right? If you ask a question, but if you're saying you never, no, that's not going to advance anything. And that's just going to put the walls up that stops good communication.
Mm. That's really important. So, some really gold points here that you've shared today. And I just want to mention to those who are watching live, feel free to drop your comments or questions in the comments box, and we'll see it come through and be happy to answer your questions live. And we're here every week doing this from 12:30 Brisbane time, just for half an hour, to talk about all things to do with divorce coaching and conflict coaching and separation and divorce. And we have a community of family lawyers and other service providers that works with to support people who are going through separation and divorce. Um, you don't offer legal advice, that you offer all
Yep.
the support around the experience of separation and divorce.
As an FDRP, Family Dispute Resolution practitioner under the Family Law Act, I'm a mediator. I'm not the lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. And as a divorce coach, I don't give legal advice, but I do provide the safe forum for people to explore the opportunity for a better outcome. And that's, I guess, the whole point of what I do is that I can put a team around a client. For instance, let's get in touch with a family lawyer. Let's talk to a therapist. Let's talk to a counselor. I love throwing their nutritionists because I think people forget when they're going through the separation. It doesn't matter who initiates it. Both sides are going through a grieving process. So let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge this pain. Let's acknowledge that you're going to forget to do some of the fundamental things that were perfectly logical 3 months ago that now no longer feel logical. And, I don't know what my legal rights are. Well, let's get a lawyer involved. And you can go talk to a lawyer. It doesn't mean you're going to engage a lawyer. You're not getting to the divorce. You're not going straight into mediation. It's find out what your rights are, get some information. Let's talk to a counselor so you can talk about some of the things that are maybe or may not be coming up. As a coach, let's talk about some of the grief. How do you handle that? How are you going to talk to the children? What do you want to say to the children? We can role play some of those things. There's, I've had clients say, we're now separating. We've agreed to separate, but I don't know where I'm living tonight. Well, let's slow that down, bring it back. So all of these things are, have you had the conversation? Who are you having the conversation with? Who are you talking with? Have you had this conversation with your spouse? Depending on how amicable the separation is depending on how you're going to communicate. Sometimes the only and the best way to do is by text. Sometimes it might be an email that requires a little more information and lay it out. And then, as a divorce coach, happy to walk the client through. How does that sound? How would you receive that? You know them better than I would. How do you think they'd receive that given your history? How would you want to receive something like this? It's
Mm,
always the question to sort of say, you know, the test that I always used is if I was receiving this, how would I respond? Would I
mm,
respond in my best self, or would I respond in something that usually I'm not so proud of if I'm going to overreact, right?
mm,
And when I'm drafting something with a client, it's what are you trying to achieve here? What is the outcome? And what will be the future that you're thinking? Because you're now building something going forward, not going backwards. Because we're never going backwards, we're always going forward. I'll use that analogy. It's like driving your car looking in the rear vision mirror. We don't go through life doing that, right? We look through the windshield. That's how we go through life, right? Looking
Mm.
in the rear vision, we're going to end up colliding with something. So be future focused, future focused, future focused, and then we'll get to those results that are better than what we're doing when we're just sitting in our own stew trying to think out loud and then go down to the pub and have a chat with a couple of our mates and think they're going to be the best advice.
Don't get your legal advice from the pub.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's easy to confide in friends, people who've been with you all along, and they know both of you. And I think there's some aspect of that that's healthy, that you can be vulnerable with people in your inner circle,
I,
but perhaps you're not looking to get professional advice from them, because there's
no,
so much that we don't know if you're not in this industry, which is why I think it's important that we share this kind of information and access to information for people who are considering these things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. Professional advice. I mean, talking with your mates, I mean, they're support, they're emotional support, but not necessarily going to be giving you the best advice.
Mm.
And that's where, talking with a family lawyer, talking with a therapist, getting involved with a divorce coach, and working through all of that. How to actually just say, I don't need to chat today. Can we take a pause? And oh, let's not forget that pause also relates to, just because they've sent you a text doesn't mean you need to respond right away. The other thing to avoid an escalation, because you haven't gotten a response, does not mean you got to send a response every 30 seconds saying, you haven't answered me, you haven't answered me, you haven't answered me. Respectfully agree that, there's a cutoff time. That's one of the other things, is that I won't answer a text after 8 p.m. As an example. And, and we agree that unless it's life threatening, there's no need to answer. We can wait 24 hours. And using those as sort of boundaries and guidelines, in that I'll send you a text, and if you don't answer right away, we've agreed that we can wait 24 hours. So maybe the next day I'll get an answer, or later that day, but not after 8 p.m. You know,
Mm.
it's,
Boundaries is such a good way to communicate, because you're saying what is working for you, what works for you. So for your in your example, likely won't be answering after 8 p.m. unless it's an emergency, and I
mhm,
have up to 24 hours to respond. That's a personal boundary that really takes, I can just even feel it when you talk about it, would take the heat off a
yeah,
party from feeling like they have to get back, otherwise there could be escalation. If they've already created that standard for themselves, something that protects them in a way of giving them time and space to consider their response. I think that really wraps up a lot of what you've been sharing today, is having these boundaries allows us to respond versus react. It gives us that breathing room, that time to pause. And I think it works in any courageous conversations. It's not just
it
about
does.
separation and divorce.
It's not. And I think having boundaries, being clear in how we communicate, and focusing on what the topic is that we want to say, and keeping it succinct and to the point, is always a good rule of thumb. And when dealing with exes, the only thing you need to share is how it affects the kids. If you don't have children and you're only talking property settlement, once you've done that, the chances are you won't be communicating anymore, because the relationship is concluded. It's when you have kids, relationships are ongoing, because guess what? Your kids are going to have kids one day, and you're going to be grandparents, and you're going to be asked, can you babysit? You know, there's relationships are ongoing, and keeping it in mind and future focused. How do you want to do this and set the foundation today? How would you
Yeah.
want that to look a year from now or 2 years from now? What would that relationship be like if you could have the ideal communication where you are no longer engaging from an escalated point?
Mm, thank you for that. That's an excellent summary. We can wrap it up there. I'll remind people that next week we'll be talking about mediation versus court, and how to
Mhm.
choose the right path because many people feel a bit lost when they're deciding between mediation and do I go straight to a lawyer if my spouse has suggested that they may be looking for a divorce? What's the court process like? So you're going to explain all of that in a very clear and grounded way as you do, and just keeping it real, and explain some of the costs, emotional and financial. So looking forward to that conversation next week. And thanks very much for those of you who are watching live and for those who are watching on replay for joining us today. It's true that separation is hard enough without the added complication of miscommunication and oversharing, as Thad's shared today. So if you're a family lawyer and you think Thad's approach might help your clients navigate conflict better or more effectively, or if you're someone who's going through separation yourself and would like support, then we encourage you to reach out to Thad. He works as a mediator, a divorce coach, and a conflict coach, and has helped people for over 3 decades in this field. So you're in good hands. And until next week, same time, take care. Thank you.